second category is that we're seeing improved ability to run experiments. And there's a local bookstore here that actually has done a lot of this work. Amazon has been running experiments for quite a while. Jeff Wilke, who is a student at MIT, went over to Amazon, and one of the things he does when he comes back to MIT and visits my office is he always asks me to open up my browser and looks at it briefly for a little while, and then he tells me, oh, I see you're in Group B. I'm like, what do you mean I'm in Group B? And he says, well, we're doing an experiment right now. You see the shopping cart is over here, and in Group A we put it over there, and we're trying to do a test to see if it makes a difference in terms of the click-through and the probability of abandoning that shopping cart. And it turns out there's about a 0.1% improvement by putting it on the right as opposed to the left. 0.1%, is that a big deal? Yeah, it makes a big difference over time. And they're doing about 200 of these experiments at any given day, continuously experimenting. So here's a random book I picked that you may want to take a look at. That's happening at Amazon. It's happening at many websites. Google is also doing many of these experiments. I was just at Microsoft this morning, and they were telling me about some of the experiments they're doing. But it's also offline companies. A good example of this is Harrah's. Some of you may have seen this movie about some guys who went to Las Vegas and made a few $100,000, a couple of MIT students. But I think this guy over here, he's also an MIT student. That's who, if I were making a movie, that's who I would have made the movie about. His name is Gary Loveman, and he had an office next to mine when we were both PhD students. He went over and became the CEO of Harrah's. I guess being a professor was too boring for him. Added a few digits to his compensation compared to mine. But ultimately, he was able to take it from sort of a third-tier company to a company that was worth over $30 billion. So it's a lot more than the guys doing card counting. And the way he did it was introducing this culture of experimentation, using statistics to run experiments. And this is not an online company, but he's still able to do it by running series of experiments, sending different mailings to customers, inviting them to be there. I went out to Las Vegas, and I got a little rewards card that all Harrah's visitors get, and they keep track of every time you do an activity, and then they give you customized incentives and rewards to see what they can do to entice you to gamble more. They also have experiments they run with their employees and with their suppliers, trying to learn how to run their company more efficiently. And it's worked out very well for them. And it's not just him and a couple of people at the top of the organization. They've got this culture throughout all of Harrah's to use technology to do more experimentation. When he came and spoke to my class, he told them that he had instituted a rule that there's two things that will get you fired from Harrah's, two important rules. One is if we ever catch you stealing from the company, you'll be fired. The second is if we ever catch you running an experiment without a proper control and treatment group, you'll be fired. So, I think that first principle probably has been around for a few centuries. But that new one, that second one is a little bit newer. And it's a change in the culture. Most of his competitors haven't adopted that second rule yet. Most companies in the United States haven't. But I think that within a few years, we're going to see both of those rules being important, particularly that second one, which is understanding how to run important experiments and successful experiments in organizations. And we're even changing some of our courses at MIT now to be more focused on experimental design. The third source of innovation and change is this ability to share things much more efficiently, like SharePoint and some of the other tools at Microsoft, wikis, just the whole Enterprise 2.0 phenomena of social networking tools inside and between organizations. A good example of that, I was visiting Cisco a little while back, and they described to me what they were doing with the wikis that they had set up. Now, at Cisco, they don't support Macintosh computers. Nonetheless, there are a number of people who, the IT department doesn't support them, but there are a number of people who like to use Mac computers. And they set up their own little community for learning about them. Cisco has a platform that makes it very easy to share information on any topic. And although the IS department doesn't specifically support Macs, it does support tools for knowledge sharing and information sharing, like these wikis. And a community developed of over 10,000 Macintosh users who shared information about, for instance, how to use the Linux printers, which with a few tweaks, you could get all the Macs to work with them. And so they shared the code for doing that. And they tell me that most of the users got up to speed entirely without any support from the central department at all, but just through this sort of wiki. And I want to emphasize this particular one because many times when people think of innovation, they think of these big breakthrough innovations. You know, someone develops a new search algorithm or a new drug, a billion-dollar blockbuster drug. But probably as important, if not more important, are the thousands of small innovations that happen in each of your organizations every day as people find a slightly better way to organize their spreadsheet or do printing or do other things. And if those innovations can be widely shared and adopted, you can have thousands of fold improvement in your performance as compared to only having one person do that particular innovation. So this tool is an example of doing that kind of sharing. And my colleague, Andrew McAfee, has a whole book on Enterprise 2.0 and all the other ways that people are sharing information, thereby turbocharging their innovative efforts. And then the fourth thing I want to touch on, the fourth IT-enabled tool, is the ability to take innovations and then replicate them throughout organizations more rapidly. So, of course, when we think of what IT does, the first thing that comes to mind is that you can replicate bits. So the software industry is a testament to how powerful that is. If you make a productivity improvement in one piece of software and then you embed it in the next version release, you can, if you're Microsoft, you get a million-fold improvement in that productivity improvement because you're not just helping one user, you're helping millions of users. Or on the internet, like at Amazon or other web companies, when you make an improvement in a particular algorithm, whether it's a search algorithm or a recommendation engine or the layout, you can then replicate that to hundreds of millions of storefronts. Of course, the storefronts are computer desktops, and get a leverage that way of your innovation. But what we're seeing now is that you can also use technology to replicate processes, even ones that aren't purely digital processes. More and more companies, even non-digital companies, are embedding their business processes in technology in such a way that you can leverage and replicate them more easily. Let me give you a specific example. There's a company called CVS, that you may have heard of. It's a drugstore. Its headquarters are near me. They're in Providence, Rhode Island, actually. And they had a problem a few years ago where they discovered that their stock price was languishing, their customer satisfaction was very low. When they went in and they looked at very closely what was happening, and they isolated the problem was in their prescription drug fulfillment process, which, if you know about drugstores, that's really the driver of a lot of the business. If you get people in for the prescription drugs, you can sell them all the rest of your commodity-type items. So they changed the process, and it's written up in a much more detailed case study, but the gist of it was they rearranged some of the steps in the process, and once they had done that, they found that they could significantly improve customer satisfaction. People weren't waiting as long. They were more satisfied. Their overall satisfaction skyrocketed from 86 to 91, which to them was a gargantuan improvement. They used to scrap and fight hard over just a 0.5% or a 1% improvement. So getting a 5% improvement like this was momentous for them. But what happened next is really the core of what I want to get across to you. And that is they took this better process and they embedded it in an enterprise information system. And that meant that once it was in there, everybody in the organization would do it consistently the new way every time. Instead of sending out sort of a printed manual and saying, we'd like you to do it this new way, or coming and training people, they embedded it in the technology so it was automatic. The pharmacists could not help but do it this new way. They had to. And furthermore, once they had embedded it, they not only got compliance with the pharmacy, but they were able to scale it up and replicate it to 4,000 other locations. So this one productivity improvement became 4,000 productivity improvements at 4,000 stores all over the country, actually all over the world. And they were able to not only get improvement in Providence, but in physical locations all over and beat their competitors everywhere. So this is a way that technology lets you take the value of one innovation and multiply it by replicating it. Not just digital goods, but even processes.